You've got to have good reviews. You know, it's really clear two identical properties in the same market, the difference in their revenue potential is pretty vast. And so it really does come down to operations and making sure that things aren't overlooked.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Radical Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Zeke Freeman. Today we've got Tim Hubbard. He is a seasoned real estate investor, entrepreneur, educator who's built a global business around short-term rentals and hospitality operations. He's the founder and CEO of Corzly. Tim leads a remote-first company that helps short-term rental owners and managers streamline operations across more than 50 cities worldwide. Originally entering real estate through investing, Tim discovered the power of short-term rentals to create both financial freedom and location independence. Today, he lives in South Brazil and his wife while managing teams and properties and hospitality operations across multiple markets. In addition to growing Corzly, Tim is an educator and mentor through STR Rich's podcast, where he teaches entrepreneurs how to build profitable short-term rental businesses. Tim's journey combines entrepreneurship, hospitality, real estate investing, technology systems, and the pursuit of freedom through business ownership. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Zeke. I guess you guys got the long bio version there, but yeah, pleasure to be here.
It's always good to know just kind of a little context of who we're chatting with. Yeah, you've got a great podcast. And so I know you're helping a lot of people out there doing short-term rentals. It's been fun to listen to a few of those, have you on. So today I think you're down in Brazil. How did you end up down in Brazil through your journey here?
Yeah. Well, I've always loved traveling. You know, I've been in real estate for 16 years now, and I got in at the very beginning for financial freedom, you know, passive income, going down that hole with Robert Kiyosaki and, you know, trying to find cash flow properties. So I've always enjoyed traveling. And I guess a decade ago, I was actually traveling to Colombia a lot and ended up moving to Colombia and then discovered Brazil and then really liked Brazil. And then so for the last 5 years or so, I've been down here, and Brazil is now home base. So yeah.
Love it. So you're managing properties across 50 different cities. How did you start building up your short-term rental business? Where did your journey kind of start with that?
Yeah, so I started with my first short-term rental 11 years ago. I'm from California originally, and so that's where my very first one is, and still is there today, still operating it. But the numbers kind of changed in California back in the day, and I was looking for better investment options. And so I headed out some different states, did quite a lot of research, ultimately landed in Tennessee, where I acquired quite a few short-term rentals, then expanded to Oklahoma City. Not your typical vacation rental places, but as we know, people are staying in short-term rentals for lots of different reasons. And so it worked well. And I started a podcast along the way. You mentioned it briefly there. It's called Short-Term Rental Riches. After I moved to South America, a lot of friends were just asking like, hey, how are you managing, you know, all of your short-term rentals remotely and still growing your portfolio? And this was kind of back in the day when managing a property virtually, especially a short-term rental, was like, you know, like a new idea. People were like, I don't know, that sounds really difficult. And so the podcast was really a way to answer those questions in short form. They're like quick, actionable episodes. And it was just talking about my own portfolio and what I was doing. But then a lot of people started reaching out on the podcast, and they said, hey, can you help with my property, or can you help with my property? And my team had gotten big enough to where we had extra capacity. You know, we could handle more reservations. We could communicate with more guests. And so pretty organically, I guess, we turned that into a business. And today we operate Corzly, and we're completely virtual, which is why we're in so many different places. And our whole mission is to handle the core operation behind our partners' short-term rentals.
Nice. So I run a virtual architecture team as well. I think there's a lot of advantages that people don't, you know, quite understand. There's also some challenges that, you know, you have to deal with building a virtual team. What does that look like for you as you built out your team, and what is your team composed of to handle your short-term rental business?
Yeah, good question. We're really broken into 4 groups at Corzly. We have our guest experience team. So they're our reception, communicate with our guests, you know, make sure everyone's happy. Also talk with the travel agencies like Airbnb. We have our listing team. They're the ones that help us create all of our listings, make sure they're optimized, make sure they're on all the platforms where they should be so that people can actually find them. We have a revenue management team, which puts the right prices at the right time in the right places. And now we have a development team, which is really exciting. So we have our own developers on board, and we've always used a lot of different software. I love software. I used to work for a software company, and I'm always like trying to use the next gadget, So that was part of my my process for managing my rentals, was just taking advantage of technology. And now today, because it's so much easier to build, we've really incorporated that, and we're trying to fill holes where we saw them exist in the market. So yeah, I guess that's what it's like on the back end. And we are spread out all over the place. So we've got team members in, Eastern Europe and Pakistan and South Africa and Philippines, South America. And why we're so spread out, I guess, I don't know. We used to hire everyone out of the Philippines because it was like, when you were looking for a virtual assistant or virtual help, that was one of the most common places to look. But now, you run a virtual architectural firm. That's amazing. Things are virtual today, and so we've really branched out. And, our positions at Corzly, we're just looking for the best talent we can find. And that's sort of led to having people in lots of different places.
Yeah. Do you still feel like when you're in a market, do you guys have any on the ground presence to kick off or start, or do you bring on a client completely remote? What are the things that you have to then fill in the gaps for on the ground that you're either partnering with or going out and doing? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So we call our customer relationships a partnership because there are a couple pieces they're doing. We're handling all the rest. So we handle the core operation, the setting up the listings, the guest communication, the revenue management, all those types of things, software setup. But we're not actually hiring their on the ground team. And so when people started joining us, I've always had my own on the ground team that helped me manage my properties. And when people came to us and said, hey, can you help us manage our properties? A lot of them already had their team in place. They had their housekeeping team and they had their maintenance. And so we simply just took over communication. And we have a lot of processes in place that, maybe they didn't, and things that we've learned from managing a lot of reservations. And so today we partner with our customers, and they either have their own team or they go out and find one, and we take over the management.
Yeah.
We charge a discounted management fee because of that. It's not for everyone. There's some people that don't want to handle anything, but it works out really well for a lot of people. And finding a housekeeper today for short-term rentals, I think there's more options than there ever has been, because short-term rentals are just they have more of a place in the market, I guess, in the real estate market today.
Yeah, we kind of looked at this when we were looking to hire a management company on our short-term rental, and it does seem like there's different slices of management groups, and there's also probably different tiers of fees depending on how engaged you want to be as an owner or not. We are, for example, we're close to our short-term rental, but we also have other focus areas of business, and so when we first started, we just wanted to be hands off, but we can still run over and deal with management, maintenance issues. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't want to pay, some management companies, are like this kind of 20-30% tier. We didn't feel like we needed that level. And then on the other end, there was companies like Vacasa that seemed like, there's less engaged, but also completely remote. And then there's some that was kind of in between and handled guest communications, maybe cleaning, had their own cleaners. We kind of landed a little bit in between with the first management group before we took it over. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, there's not kind of a one size fits all in property management. What's kind of y'all's like expertise and specialty, like when you're looking for an ideal client, and what are the things that's kind of the competitive advantage of Corzly if someone's looking to work with you guys?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few things. I mean, as you know, there's a lot that goes into a short-term rental operation. There's a lot of pieces, and the more properties you add, the more all of those tasks, the more of them there are. So we really like working with with owners with small portfolios or property managers. And what we found is, and I was in the same position myself as when I was getting started, like it didn't make financial sense for me to go out and hire a full-time revenue manager, or to hire 5 full-time receptionists to make sure I had 24/7 coverage and there was someone there in case someone else got sick, and I wasn't asking people to work 14-hour shifts or be on call all week. And so like to have a team, and the other thing is we go out and hire a virtual assistant, which can definitely work, but there are challenges, and one of them is that we sort of expect someone joining us to be an expert at all the different pieces of a short-term rental. And there's a lot of different pieces. Revenue management, for example, is completely different than talking to guests. But then we have all the different policies and all the different listing sites, and there's just a ton of things that happen on the background. So we take that away. If someone still wants to be the owner of their listing, a lot of traditional management companies own your listings like Vacasa, and if they don't do a good job, you're kind of just locked in there. And so we're different. We work on behalf of our partners' properties. All the money goes to them. It also means that like a property manager keeps their image and keeps their brand. And Corzly handles that core operation on the back end, which allows them to focus on what they probably got into the business in the first place for, which is growing their portfolio. And so, yeah, we bring the organization, we bring the expertise for managing tens of thousands of reservations, all the SOPs. No one has to hire anyone, and we just make it a lot easier.
How do you deal with cleaning on the ground? Are you guys coordinating those, or is that
we do?
On
yeah,
the other side?
Yeah, we'll handle all the coordination, and we've got a lot of pieces in place for that. First thing is just making sure the cleaner knows about it. So we've got. We use Breezeway right now, but we've also built a cool tool internally. We call it Smoothly, and it's to make sure the whole turnover goes smoothly. And it does some nice things like, we're tracking all of the communication that comes in for a reservation or for a property. And so if a guest mentions something, whether it's during the stay, whether it's in a public review, whether it's in their private feedback, if a housekeeper had mentioned something before, like during a turnover, all that information is getting tracked, and we incorporate it in each checklist. So we have a checklist for every turnover. We highly suggest photos. We have all those basic sort of elements that you can put in a turnover checklist. But we have a really good follow-up program. We're really transparent with all the reviews. So if good reviews are coming through, we pass those over. If a not so good review or something that needs to be changed comes over, then we incorporate that in the future checklist. So it's dynamic. So we're never really overlooking anything.
So you mentioned you've got developers coming in. I'm assuming that's software developers, not like land developers. You mentioned you're doing Smoothly. What that seems like to be a core part of what you guys do. Some of the software integration in your company. What type of software components or technology are you guys integrating in?
Well, we still use what we found to be the industry leading tools. So we use Hostaway for our PMS, and we use tools like Price Labs and Breezeway. We use some AI tools for guest reception. But the challenge is they're all different tools. Like Hostaway, was just valued at $1 billion, but they're still not the best when it comes to revenue management, or they're not the best when it comes to AI technology for short-term rentals. And so we've gone to what we've found has been the best, but because all those programs are separate, it makes it a little more complicated, and not everything's connected really well. For example, we have a lot of AI automations that we've put in regarding operational, turnover tasks. Maybe a guest left something at the property, for example. Like all of these tasks happen frequently, maybe not with one individual property, but at some point in time, like someone's going to leave something at your property, and you're going to need to message them to figure out how to get it back and to go through that process. And so that requires 2 tools right now in the industry. Of course we have our human team, but we're working towards using AI to automate as much as we possibly can. And so I guess, long story short, we're using our developers to bridge the gap between a lot of tools that exist. We have a central hub where all of our partners go and they can see everything without logging into multiple tools. but it's also helping us to create things that don't exist, like, having a dynamic checklist for a housekeeper doesn't exist in Breezeway. It doesn't exist in Turno or some of the other options. And so we're bridging everything together, but then we're filling some holes where we've identified them.
So curious with AI, how are you utilizing AI? How do you see it changing the industry right now? Like, what are the opportunities that are really helping short-term rentals? All right, guys, I've got one quick favor to ask. If you've been enjoying Radical Hospitality, if these conversations have inspired you, encouraged you, or helped you think bigger about what it means to create spaces that truly serve people, would you hit the subscribe button? It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference for our show and for our team. We're working hard to bring some of the most thoughtful entrepreneurs, builders, and visionaries in hospitality, people creating meaningful spaces all over the world. And your subscription helps us keep getting better every single week. And if you're someone who's dreaming about building a hospitality project of your own, that's what we do at Root Architecture every single day. We help clients design and bring those spaces to life. You can book a discovery call with me or someone on our team at therootteam.com. Thanks so much for being a part of this journey. It really means a lot to me. Subscribe, stay with us, and let's keep building cool stuff that serves people well.
Yeah, I think tons of opportunity with AI. And I know there's a lot of tools out there. It seems like every week there's a new one that promises you can turn it on and, your business is going to be automated. We have to be really careful, right? We don't get second chances when it comes to a guest experience, usually. And so what we found is that a lot of the AI tools out there today do a good job at responding to simple questions like, what's your Wi-Fi password, or, what's the address to, I can't find my check-in instructions, or what's my door code, even though we've sent it several times. And so those basic type questions, AI can do a really good job at. But where it's not doing a great job yet is in more detailed operational tasks. Take like an early check-in request, for example. Let's say someone, and we know most guests request early check-ins, or maybe they request a late checkout, right? There's quite a few components that go into that, right? First of all, we need to make sure that the property's clean. If as us as a manager helping lots of different owners, we also need to make sure that that's something the owner of the property is okay with. So that's the first place we check. Then we make sure that the property's clean. But then maybe we charge for early check-ins, but we only charge for early check-ins if it happens to be like 3 hours in advance or more. And then we need to know how much to charge, and then we need to send a payment link to the guest. So some of these like multi-layer tasks is where we found that AI is just not there. Like, there is no tool that you can turn on and automate. So we've built a lot of that on the back end. But the beautiful thing about that is, like, those tasks are the same. We manage properties of all different sizes and shapes, small and big. And the way someone asks for an early check-in is the same. Like, the processes we need to check are the same. And so I think there's a ton of opportunity with AI for us to continue automating a lot of these tasks that are normal, that are core to the short-term rental operation, and that's our mission, is to continue doing that and to be able to offer really competitive prices, so someone doesn't have to figure this out on their own, but also make the guest experience better. And so that's ultimately one of the really big pushes with AI is make the guest experience better, because if that's better, then we get better reviews and we get more visibility, and then our property earns more money. And a couple just quick ways that we see that happening today is AI never forgets anything, So if we've got a really good knowledge base on a property, every little detail that comes up, we're going to remember if a guest was there 2 years ago, where, a human receptionist, that's just not going to click unless there's something there. It also gives us a way to be really professional and consistent with our messaging, so as someone grows their portfolio, you have multiple people working on reception, but they don't all respond exactly the same way, or maybe with the exact same tone. But with AI, we can have a central tone. So yeah, they're a little bit there, but we're really excited about AI because it's making the operation more efficient. It's making the guest experience better as long as it's used in the right ways.
Now, are you using AI with any specific tools that people should be thinking about, or are those like built-in custom tools?
Yeah, both. So We've tried a few. We used to use Bestie, I think it was called. We use Conduit right now, but we also have a lot, like we maxed Conduit out after like 3 months. We're like on a direct Slack channel with their team, and it's like we just keep maxing them out on things. So we've built a lot of integrations on top of it just to help us make sure that nothing gets overlooked. I think that's one of the really important pieces with AI too, is like we need a way to make sure it's doing the job it's supposed to, that there are no errors, and that certain types of messages that maybe shouldn't be going to, in AI right now are automatically going to one of our team members. So we have lots of escalations and things set in there to automatically route messages depending on the type of message.
Yeah. So is Conduit is that primarily a guest communication platform where it's picking up and making recommendations?
Yeah, Conduit started specifically in the short-term rental industry. They've since branched out to become a communication platform, trying to serve lots of different industries. So they integrate with a lot of the most common property management softwares like Guesty and Hostaway and those types of tools. So that's the one we've been using. I think the writing's on the wall, and we're already on our way to replacing Conduit and just probably building it out on our own. But there are some, what's the other tool? That HostBuddy is another one I hear quite often that people seem to be pretty happy with. So quite a few tools out there today.
Yeah. And then you came in it from the investor side. Are you still investing, and is there certain markets that you like or are working well still in 2026?
Yeah, let's see. So I haven't been as active, looking for new properties. I did actually acquire a property in Orlando this year, which most people are probably thinking like, why would you buy a property in Orlando? It's the, the most competitive short-term rental space, maybe in the US. But it's interesting. I think the property's interesting and it's unique. It has a larger lot where most short-term rentals in Orlando, they're like the same. They are, they've got a pool, they're basically cookie cutter homes. And so I think there's quite a bit of opportunity with that property, but it was also sort of a personal decision because it's sort of like our mid place between my family and Brazil. So it's a good stopover place, and we like Florida. So aside from that, I've been investing in Medellin, Colombia for the last 4 years. We built a small boutique hotel project. Well, we have 8 units today. The license is for 20. It's taken a really long time. And so I'm kind of backing out of that one. I also haven't spent as much time there, but it is up and operating. Amazing location. A little different, doing a development project internationally. There's definitely been some learning lessons there. But outside of those two things, I would say, Zeke, there are properties I have that I am planning on exchanging. They have a lot of equity, but they're both long-term or short-term rentals. But we've just been so focused on Corzly recently. Honestly, I haven't spent a lot of time. So
yeah. I think it's good, to have a core focused business, and I always look at real estate as a place that we're parking long-term wealth and building long-term wealth, and I think it's good to kind of do both alongside. So that's what we do in the architecture, but I think it's also helpful when you can speak to your clients and say, here's what we've done and experienced and learned. A lot of what I've tend to focus with on Radical Hospitality, since we're kind of involved in this niche of boutique hotels and outdoor hospitality, we're doing a lot of micro resorts, is that space. So good, bad, or ugly, and sometimes things don't work, but I'd love to hear more about that Columbia project and how that's started, as much you'd be willing to share of that, what it is, and how how that one's gone.
So I was living pretty much full time in Colombia for quite a few years, and I love real estate, and so naturally I just was looking for opportunities, and I had acquired a property there in 2017, I think. It was like a personal residence. So that was the first place I got. And then a buddy came up with another opportunity. I was looking for a lot to build a home, actually. I wanted to build my own house there. And this lot came up. It was pretty good size, like a little over 2 acres. Pristine location, amazing view, relatively good price, and it already had a license for a commercial license to build in an area that's surrounded by like nice subdivisions, which is pretty unique. And so we both went in together to purchase the lot, and it was big enough to where we both were going to build our own homes, and then like basically divide the lot in two so we could have some rentals to support, the property, pay for everything, make a little extra money, and then have, somewhat of our dream homes there. And so we went through all the architectural plans, and then the city's plans, or the city changed. Our permitting, they basically weren't allowing us to build individual homes there anymore. And so we went through quite a long process of getting a new license. Ultimately, we couldn't build the homes, but we could build 20 units. And again, an amazing location. And the license also allows for a restaurant. So we went down that road, started construction last year. We finished about 8 units. We ran into a couple other pauses along the way, neighbors that wanted to shut the project down, even though it was fully permitted and legal and everything like that. And in the meantime, I was spending more and more time in Brazil, which is pretty much home based now. And so I kind of just became disconnected from the project a little bit. Last time I was there, we're up and running. My partner lives there full time, and he wants to continue to build it out, but I'm actually looking to sell my 50%. So it was a good learning lesson. Had it gone quicker, I would still be fully involved with it, but we were really delayed like a couple years. And during those years, just, my life changed a little bit. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah. Development's a whole different thing. I mean, it takes time. It's, it's not something like a short-term rental that you can either go buy and put on, or even a single family. So sorry that it didn't like pan out the way you wanted, but also not surprised, it takes time.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have enough units up and running that they cover all the costs, and and they are beautiful units. They're like, they all have
what kind of units did you guys do?
So our designs actually have 3 different layouts. The first 8 we did are like individual cabana type properties, but they're all raised up on big columns and amazing views. They have big porches with a private jacuzzi. They're 1 bedrooms, but they also have a good amount of space. Like they have full kitchens, they have full laundry. And so in Medellin, a lot of people end up spending months there, or they go there and then they want to go back. And so they're really built to accommodate someone that would spend weeks or months there, but also a great place for someone looking for just a couple nights. And then the other 2 designs were 2 6-unit buildings. So they're still fully approved today. We just haven't got into them yet. And then there's a great spot for a restaurant. My partner happens to have another hotel project that's already up and running. He's got a really nice restaurant that's up and running. So that's kind of his forte on the restaurant side.
What's the name of the development if somebody wanted to pull it up or check it out?
Vista. Yeah, Hotel Vista.
In Colombia, or just?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to update our photos, and I don't think we do actually.
Okay, I was like, I'm not finding it.
Yeah,
I see a little thing on your
LinkedIn.
To. It's got a couple, like 1 shot of it, and it looks like it's got some cool canvas designs on it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were what the overall like cost per unit was on what you guys did on these things?
We ended up having more infrastructure than we anticipated. So there's a natural spring on the lot, and there was a lot of water drainage and stuff we had to do. And we also have a rather large reception building that we put in place, that has a backup generator and like electrical room and laundry and reception and bathrooms and everything. I think we were in each unit around like 60 or 70,000, not including the land costs or the infrastructure or the reception building.
Yeah. If you were to do it again, what would you do different?
At the time, I have a partner there that's lived there full time, already has another project, already worked with the architect that helped us, and nothing but great things to say about the architect. Like, he already had some other successful projects, and he also managed the construction. And so from the very beginning, it was sort of like a hands-off type of project. Or I should say, after we found out we couldn't put our houses there, it became like a hands-off project. And so I'm really fortunate that I have my partner and then also had the architect that managed the project. I guess, me personally investing in another country now, I would be a little more cautious just on the permitting process and not just assume that because there's a license, that everything would go as planned. That whole process is quite a bit different there than I think it is in the United States, and I still don't fully understand it. And so I probably wouldn't do another one internationally.
Yeah. We kind of started on the path. So a lot of our team is down in the Dominican Republic, and my business partner on our hotel, a coffee farm down there.
Oh, cool.
And he's been working on this coffee farm for a long time. Beautiful property. Our team helped do the master plan. He's an architect as well, so he kind of led that within our team. And we went down the path initially of doing this as a development that we were going to kind of work on together, bring our investor groups in, and not being for one, me not speaking the language, two, not understanding the local politics. It seems really good on the surface how cheaply you can build in foreign countries and the quality of construction. I went down there and walked through some properties that he'd been involved in, and beautiful construction, fraction of the price of what it costs us to build here. But as we got down the path, there's just so much involvement in a hospitality project that you've just got to be able to engage and be able to get in and control. And for me, not speaking the language, I never got to that comfort level of, hey, I could go in and, if a contractor, wasn't performing right, be able to correct that situation. The same thing with permitting, it not that permitting the U.S. is straightforward, but at least, there is a set of rules and understanding, and, you can push and drive through. There's a little bit more of, bribery and things like that just kind of happen, which honestly is like the U.S., like we might be better off with some of our permit officers if we could just bribe them to actually do their job. So it's not the worst system in the world, but so I kind of had some step backs on that, and then we chose to actually step back to the same partners and work on a project here locally while he's continued on that development down there. So I love Central America, and to vacation down there. I'd love to do something in Costa Rica, because they're just fun places to live.
Yeah.
But they're also, as not local and not understanding certain local politics, especially language, that has made me nervous. Seems like, do you speak Spanish well, and are you?
I do. Yeah, I think it's the last years in Brazil, I probably have more of like a Portunhol, they call it, Portuguese Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
But comfortable enough at least to get involved with projects in Spanish.
Yeah. Have you seen many people or helped any clients buy short-term rentals either in Colombia or Brazil?
I haven't personally helped anyone, maybe connected a few people. I have a lot of my friends in Colombia are naturally real estate guys too, and so like we have real estate meetups and stuff like that. But yeah, I usually just gave a few tips and referred them, like actually finding a property in South America versus the United States is quite different too. It's a bit of the wild west where there is no centralized MLS. There's some websites that show listings, but you might find the same listing on multiple websites for multiple different prices, and you really have to do your due diligence. And I guess my number one recommendation is like make sure you got a good lawyer that does speak your language and understands everything, if you're planning on acquiring something.
Yeah. We again, like we've looked a few times and have gotten cold feet as we've gotten close down. There seems to be, just something easier about investing in your backyard and vacationing. where you might want to vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which seems a little bit what you're doing in Orlando. It's nice having a place that, you can go to. I think a lot of people get into short-term rentals for the ability to be able to sometimes utilize it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. Well, as you are moving ahead with Corzly, what's kind of next in your radar? What are you excited about and working on these days?
I'm really excited about the technology side. I mean, we meet regularly with our team, and we can just move so quickly today. Where we're using some sort of tool and we're like, hey, we could do this better, and then next week we've already made the tool. And we're using it live with properties, and it's having better results. So I think that's what I'm most excited about. And my partner and I actually met my partner in Colombia. He built a boutique hotel there years ago.
Oh, cool.
And we partnered up with Corzly about 3 years ago. And like, we both understand the industry just really, really well. And being able to have the perspective helping owners in dozens of different cities is just a truly, truly unique perspective. And so like, we know what the issues and the challenges are, and we get to try to build things to make them all easier and to make everyone's lives easier and optimize their properties at the same time. So yeah, I'd say that's what we're most excited about.
Nice. And what do you see in 2026? Which of your kind of portfolio of properties, which ones are performing well? What are the things that are helping them perform well?
You've got to have good reviews. It's really clear. Like if you're not getting good reviews, we can do everything we can on our end, list the property perfectly, price it properly. But if, something's getting dropped there at the property, the doorknob's loose and it never gets fixed, that, the difference between two identical properties in the same market, the difference in their revenue potential is pretty vast. And so it really does come down to operations and making sure that things aren't overlooked. I think, my personal portfolio, a lot of them are in urban areas because I had acquired properties that were previously long-term rentals and I converted them into short-term rentals. A lot of people jumped on that bandwagon as well. And so there's been a lot more supply increase there. And, revenues have dropped down. So I think the urban, more commodity type properties have definitely, it's more competitive. And so we see, a lot of the properties that are, more of like an experience type property, like the boutique resort, micro resort stuff you guys are doing. There can be a lot of opportunity there. Just got to make sure the operation's in place, because you can make a beautiful, beautiful property, but if it's not ran well, then, it's kind of a waste.
Yeah, nice. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, Tim, what are the best ways to connect?
Yeah, my podcast is Short Term Rental Riches. So it's on all the normal outlets there, also on YouTube. And our website is Corzly.com, Corzly. There's a little partner with us button there. If anyone's interested, I would love to chat with you personally and see if your properties, your portfolio make a good fit.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for hopping on. Good to get to know you a little bit, Tim.
Yep. Same here. Pleasure to be here.